beyond that, normally available to them in the common concourse of living. Those of you who have attended the rain dances in the southwest part of the United States, up in one of those mesa villages, will have some concept of what Pike meant. Perhaps being in New Mexico himself for a time, he saw these dances in their earlier and purer forms. But his point is, and we see it still, that if you sit quietly watching these dances, listening to the almost endless rhythm of the drums, watching the interminable motion of their feet, the feet of the dancers, watching the strange designs which they form, weaving in and out with the skill of a Russian trained ballet. If you keep on watching this, listening to the tones, seeing the wonderful pageantry of color, and observing the remarkable makeup and adorning of the dancers, you will in a short time find yourself moved away from the everyday. You will find a kind of strange disorientation within your own consciousness. You will feel as though a strange, subtle, inscrutable force was moving in upon you, that these dancers were emanating something, that the whole complete pattern was alive with a kind of force, that this force swept over the spectator, that he felt it picking him up, moving him out of his normal thinking and his normal feeling, and tying him to an ageless atavism within himself. Pike realized that in the classical periods of Greek religious initiation, that these sacred dramas, designed and devised by persons unknown, but presumably bestowed originally by the gods, that these dramas were not merely something to see. The participant was a part of a living formula. The observer was able in a mysterious way to capture the overtones, ritual providing something that appealed to faculties that could not directly listen to words, nor could they be moved by the most sober intellectual instruction. Actually, ritualism was an experience rather than an instruction. It applied its force directly to the eyes of man. And here there is a strange certainty that is denied to almost any other sensory perception. That which a man sees, that he instinctively believes and accepts as true. He believes that his reason may be deceived, but his sight cannot be deceived. That what comes directly into his vision is as it appears to be, and about it there can be no uncertainty. Thus ritualism, passing or bypassing the rational faculties, giving no time in its unfolding for the individual to sit back and intellectualize, sweeps him along from one mood to another, carrying him, as in the Greek rituals and in many other sacred rites, in the direction of a collective sublimity. He feels himself departing from this world and entering into a world of divine things. He is no longer aware that the symbolic deities before him are priests, masked and robed. He is no longer aware that these rituals are taking place in a house built by men, and that their fantasy is enlarged by mechanical devices. These factors cease to be important. There is the immediate impact of the splendor itself. This splendor, moving some source of splendor, or some instinct to splendor within the human constitution. This is the magic to which General Pike refers. It is this magic of unworldliness, this magic of freedom from the commonplace, this magic of being set apart into another kind of world, a world that will endure while the rites continue. It is as though the candidate passing through these rituals actually did go to a different world and came face to face with beings and powers transcendent and remote. This ritualism inevitably affects the person. Civilized travelers wandering in primitive nations have felt the impact of it and have suddenly realized that their vaunted sophistry slips away from them, that the ritual moves in and the modern way of life moves out. Yet in the smug security of a non-ritualistic daily living, we do not feel this danger of being picked up and carried away into an ancient spell of some kind. Ritualism, because of this peculiar value or dimension of itself, is in many respects an almost perfect form of instruction. And in the great ritualistic mysteries, it combined with nearly every other sensory faculty in giving a new set of instruments by which the individual could be moved, could be caused to be inwardly animated, and could be impelled to forget himself, his daily concerns, the small projects which normally motivated him, and share again in the ancient ceremonies. Pike points out that nearly all rituals have psychologically been influenced by the motions of nature, that actually man, in creating these symbolic patterns, is following the law of universal motion. He is creating great sweeping dances, like the motions of the planets in the sky, the processions of stars moving forever above him, the motion of rivers flowing from their sources to the sea, the movement of wind in the field of tall, ripe grain. These things seem ritualistic. They seem to belong to currents and energies from which we are divided by our own particular and special ways of living and thinking. Also, ritual has a certain advantage over other forms of instruction, inasmuch as the word is unnecessary. Persons of different concepts, different backgrounds, different races can share in the common experience of rhythmic motion. Like art, painting particularly as it was used in the medieval religious life of Europe. The picture indeed tells more than 5,000 words. The picture is perfectly intelligible to the illiterate person or the stranger who cannot speak our tongue. He gains the same message because he is reading with his eyes not letters or words, but the symbolic restoration of processes or concepts. Ritual, furthermore, because it possesses a certain theatrical dimension, makes possible a strange and wonderful effect upon the mind through the distorting of literalities. Many things in their very literal ways are so commonplace to us that they do not move us. But the moment we create a situation not familiar, different from anything we know, we become lost in that situation because we cannot control it. The familiar situation we can control, but not the unfamiliar. Thus the dancers in some ceremony may be our friends, even our relatives and members of our household. But when they are masked and regaled, and in various ways separated so that our eyes see in them nothing familiar, nothing that we know, but only strange emblems of birds and beasts. This disorientation separates them from their human estate and gives them a significance apart from the common things which we know. Thus, ritual has a tendency to break through the walls which our training and our education have built around our imagination. Ritual releases the imaging power, the creative, imaginative imagery of our own inner lives. Ritual, then, is a kind of an escape from the prosaic into a world of fantasy, where even fairy stories can be true, where old legends and lore suddenly come to life, and where great principles, long observed but ignored, suddenly become undeniable. All these points have much to do with the descent of this ancient way of instruction. This instruction, by creating moods, by causing us to feel certain things with a tremendous urgent intensity, a feeling which can possess us. Today we know that man, far from being the intellectual creature that we think he is still almost totally a being of emotions. That the mind has become a kind of crown jewel in this coronet of senses, we know. But the average person is not converted, directed, or instructed by his mind alone, or by the minds of others. Without feeling, without the intense experience of participating, sharing, being part of something, imagination is not quickened and understanding is not ripened. What we have gone through, what we have experienced, what we have intimately felt, these are the things which move us and cause the rise of certainties within our own consciousness. In ritualism, as it was presented in ancient times, therefore, man was divided into a twofold creature, one part of himself living in the world, and the other part in a mysterious temple that was separate from the world. He had an outer and an inner life. He had two kinds of language with which he could converse, the language of the everyday and the sacred language of the mysteries. He lived always on the threshold of a universal condition, which was no further from him than the door of the sanctuary. From his fields, from the marketplace, from the station or estate which he possessed, the individual walked through the great plumed archway of columns, and immediately he was no longer in the common world. This is an experience we are losing very rapidly, this sense of two-worldliness, this sense that ever near us is another world, ever different. Today, even when we enter into a place of worship, some way we do not usually get that sense of otherworldliness unless we enter into a great cathedral or some place so magnificent in its sanctity, in its artistry, in its mass, that we are simply swept off our feet. Thus we come to cling ever more closely to ordinary things. Our small problems, our daily existence, these become tremendously real to us, and there is no contrast. There is no other world of vision and of higher sight that seemingly can reach us. If we have vision at all, it must be from within ourselves. We do not know what it means to step with a few short paces from the world of man to the world of God. Now, perhaps